Good morning and welcome to the CHSS seminar series. Today we have a special invited guest, Dr. Maxime Jeffrey from UAEU's own Department of Government and Society. Dr. Jeffrey's fields of interest are arts and culture management, culture districts and institutions, and the sociology of culture. Today, Dr. Jeffrey will discuss Pierre Bourdieu Habitus. Bourdieu is a French sociologist. Habitus is described as one of Bourdieu's most ambiguous texts, addresses the concept of cultural capital. Bourdieu identified cultural capital as the collection of symbolic elements such as skills, tastes, posture, clothing, mannerism, material belongings, credentials, and etc. that are acquired through being a part of particular social class. Bourdieu suggested that people find a new solution to new situation based on their gut feeling and intuition.
So Pierre Bourdieu, as you know, he's a French scholar. He's born in 1930 and he died in 2002. He grew up in Degain in southern France, but in a western part of southern France, from a family farmer. So it's interesting to look at his background, since his theory about habitus is very controversial. It's an important time where Pierre Bourdieu started to work with Jean-Claude Passeron, was another famous French scholar, still alive. And they wrote two very important books. It was Milestone in Sociology of Education. Still nowadays, these books are still debated, very controversial. The first one is Reproduction in Education, Society and Culture. In the French society, how the French system, is reproducing itself from the schools and the university. So it's very controversial, can you imagine it, in the society that is claimed to be democratic, with probably one of the country with the most funding for cultural institutions, to schools, universities, that are all free. Even if you are a foreigner, you can come to France, you can study, it will be like just a small fee, but nothing. It's just symbolic fee. So it's free education. So these two scholars, they came to study this institution, and they discovered that something is wrong. These institutions are not so democratic and not so open as they pretend to be. So the second book came later, in late 70s. It was The Inheritors, French Students and Their Relations to Culture. So you can see from this time already, Bourdieu started, and Jean-Claude Passeron, of course, started to have interest in culture related to education. How culture is related and connected to education. And what's the impact on that? So it's interesting also to look at Pierre Bourdieu's main influences, because Pierre Bourdieu didn't come up without nothing. He was a philosopher, as I said, and he read a lot when he was a student. And so first influence is interesting because they can be opposite. Of course they are opposite, but one of his most important influence is Max Weber. It's surprising, very surprising, because Max Weber is a completely anti-Pierre Bourdieu theory at some point. So he borrowed the notion of habitus that Max Weber used in sociology of religion, and also he built the notion of field based on the idea, Max Weber's idea of ideal types. So now the concept of habitus and its use in social sciences. So the habitus is, for Pierre Bourdieu is defined as durable dispositions acquired by individuals during the process of socializations. Okay, so this is for Bourdieu, this is the product of past social conditions from your early childhood. Okay, when you grew up with your parents, with your family, the environment, your initial environment, is actually contributing in building some kind of habitus to any of us. okay, depending on, of course, social environment. Of course, practice and representations that the individual will mobilize also for his social actions. So from this background, social background that you have, you mobilize tools or references, cultural references in the society that might help you or not, depending on the situations. Okay, so it refers more generally to the physical embodiment of cultural capital. The way we think is completely structured by where we are from, where we live, the environment. Okay, so that's the first idea, and the second one is interesting as well. How the conditioning associated with a particular class of conditions of existence produce habitus, systems of durable transposable disposition, and then structured structures predisposed to function as structuring structures. So when you read it, even in French, it's that complicated. Yes, it's not because it's translated in English. It's even in French. When you start to read Bourdieu, you're like, stop. What does that mean? What is this? It can take like almost 1 year to understand this sentence. So you will spend one year reading one page. But now, when we apply this idea on social world, this is different. So think about growing up in a rough neighborhood, like in the US, in Baltimore. I could take the example in Marseille as well. I will talk about it later. But take the example of Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, which is, not easy to live with a high level of unemployment. Problem of crimes, drug dealing, things like that. Okay, so if you start to live in this neighborhood, in this kind of neighborhood environment, you will need to find solutions to survive. Okay, so you will build specific skills and strategies to survive in this environment. So instead of waiting that something is happening, you will start to find solutions such as maybe start dealing drugs and I don't know, things like that, because you have to survive in this rough environment. Okay, so you will develop specific skills. But if you are from this Baltimore rough neighborhood and you move to the more middle class one, your skills you learn in Baltimore won't help you in the new one. That's the problem. Dealing drugs, you have to get, some point to be smart to deal drugs. It's unfortunate, but it's like that. But these skills won't help you in, more middle class or established families neighborhood. These families won't accept you. They will say, no, you have no education. No, we won't accept you. You are not accepted in college, sorry. Okay, so you have, of course, skills that are relative depending on where you live and where you are growing up. Okay, so from that we can understand better the idea of habitus, how habitus is unconsciously shaping our way of living and our personality at some point. The more you have friends that are coming from the same social environment, the more you will share the same habitus. Okay, it's not the same as if you go to Baltimore and you look at, and start to play with the kids from Baltimore that will be completely different from you. So now, of course, habitus is strongly related to the idea of cultural capital. So we cannot talk about habitus without the idea of cultural capital that has been developed by Pierre Bourdieu. So Pierre Bourdieu developed this idea of capital, as I said, borrowed from Karl Marx's idea of capital, but when we talk about capital from Karl Marx's perspective, we know it's only capital as money, okay, as an economic value. Okay, so now Pierre Bourdieu transferred this idea of capital not only in money but also in different areas such as capital, such as culture and social capital. So here you have a graph that helps you to understand this idea of volume of capital combining different types of capital. Okay, so we have economic capital at the top, that's the Marxist idea. And then we have cultural capital, cultural goods, skills, degrees, habitus, social disposition of behavior. If you are polite, if you know about politeness. This is cultural capital. If you write an email like this, like sometimes students are doing, hey, I want my grade. No, this is not good. This is, your professor might be hurt because it's not related to his cultural capital. He's affected. Okay, so it's like, what is this? It's like a hit, you know? I don't understand. No, so having skills regarding writing emails, you know, being polite in society is cultural capital as well. If you don't know these rules, you might be rejected. So to synthesize, you have the idea of economic capital, which is what you have. Cultural capital is what you know, knowledge and knowledge for goods, for fine arts, and okay, so to recognize quality in terms of cultural production, okay. And social capital is the people you know that can help you. Cultural capital is, of course, incorporated from the early age. Okay, if you are exposed to books, knowledge, if your parents have education already, they know several languages, they help you they tell you some stories, and they help you to read, and they get interest, they have interest in curiosity, they raise your curiosity and skills. Yeah, that will help you. That will help the child in and to occupy. You have a higher level of chance to occupy a dominant position in your future profession. Depending on the environment, of course, it creates difference in style, clothing, behavior, taste, and cultural practices. How we deal with that? Yes, objectified, yes, luxury goods, houses, cars, tells a lot about, of course, social class, things that we own and use in everyday life. Food as well. Food tells a lot. It's very important aspect of the society, and it's clearly related to cultural capital for Pierre Bourdieu. Organic food. You have now more and more this interest in organic food. So organic food versus, as opposed to fast food. Why? So who has the knowledge of what is organic, what is not? So if you have the knowledge, it's good for you. But if you don't, and you eat everyday fast food like McDonald's every day because you think it's good. There is salt, sugar, yes, anything that is addicting, you know, and you don't know. So you might eat McDonald's every day, but you don't know that you are affecting your health because you have no knowledge about that. But so cooking is not only about knowledge, but it's also about health. What do you know about your health? Okay, for what is good for your health, how you know that? Also for performances, if you look at cultural performances, tells a lot about people attending this performance and the structure of the society as well. So symphonic music orchestra is an interesting case. It's not only the place of appreciation of arts, of high arts, but also the place of social exhibition, status. You can see people like with prestige, honor, with people of status, most of the time. Okay, and whereas as opposed to hip-hop concert, rap concert, which is most of the time the place of social expression, but also critique of social stratification. You have like people with lower background, and that relates to aesthetic, cultural practices, and music. Okay, so the difference between the two genres are extreme here. So you have the idea of cultural capital on these two axes. So cultural capital is positive here and negative here, and we have economic capital. So from these different axes, you have the idea of most desirable positions and less desirable positions. If you relate only economic capital and cultural capital, and if you put practices, data on this graph, so it's a graph for French practices, cultural practices during the 80s. You find different practices that are not equal. Why? Why they are not equal? They are not flat. They are not on the same level. So here we find bridge, golf, piano, chess, tennis, skiing boat, engineers. So you relate it. Pierre Bourdieu relates it to professions. Okay, higher education teachers. Okay? And if we go in this part, yes, we have fishing, football, accordion, belote, okay, beer, okay, commercial employees, professions and cultural activities that are, and goods that are not completely related. Why? Why it is like that? Okay, and then Bourdieu went even farther. That's the political aspect of Pierre Bourdieu. He even associated who people vote for, like voting for the left or voting for the right. Okay, but that's highly controversial here. You're reaching the top of the controversy. So yes, one example, just one example, last example regarding music preferences. So here we have the idea, so that's coming from the distinction book of Pierre Bourdieu. If you compare these two graphs, this one and this one, here we have well-tempered clavier. It's from Bach, Jean-Sébastien Bach. Okay, we have mostly people attending and having some skills for these kinds of music are secondary teachers and higher education teachers, art producers. And if you look like the piece of Blue Danube that is very Strauss piece, but is very popular. If you type the Blue Danube on Google, you will listen to it. Everybody knows it. It's very popular. We find mostly manual workers, domestic servants, craftsmen, shopkeepers, so on and so forth. Why it is like that? Okay, so why secondary teachers are not here? Okay, so why we have this distinction at the end? Okay, so I don't know if I can, maybe we can, yes, just this one is important slide. How the school, now how the school institutions are building these structures, this social order. And you have, from that you have a better idea of the habitus. So we have the school, the university or schools, and academic culture as a cultural field. Okay, so the general field of academic culture. Okay, and now we move to the second step is regarding relationship to this academic culture, depending on where you are from and your family environment. Okay, social environment. Okay, if you are familiar, are you familiar or foreign to this academic culture? Depending on the level of education of your parents. Okay, so if your parents they have already education, of course you will be more familiar with academic culture, the culture of the university. If your parents are less or very poorly familiar with this culture, it will be foreign. Then what Pierre Bourdieu is observing is that from that we notice that students that are more familiar with academic culture have more chance to have diploma, degree. Whereas students that are more foreign, have more chance to have school failure. Okay? And so from that's where the habitus is working. From this school failure, what Bourdieu is explaining is that students internalize that. They internalize this failure as that's social order. Okay, so that you have acceptance, whereas here we have legitimation. Okay, students, that's not the fault of the students from that are familiar with academic culture. That's not their fault, but they think that they are legitimate because of inheritance. I have it, but so, I mean, all of us are in this category here. We are all here. Otherwise, you won't be here. Okay? So, okay, so legitimation is important, but unconscious as well. We don't know that. Okay, you get your diploma and you think you worked a lot. Okay, you work, of course, but somehow you have something that helps you before. Okay, and while on the other side, if you fail, you have no other choice to accept. And you think it's like that. I can't compete, and that's where symbolic violence through degrees, culture, habits, manners is apply. Okay, and at the end you have the function, the idea of function, social order, built on culture, academic culture. Okay? So I might finish on that. So the point is that for Bourdieu is that when you think about culture and education, it's not only hobbies. Don't think only about hobbies and minor influences. People think that, oh, this is culture, this is nothing, I don't care. This is economy and finance is good. No, I mean, culture is critical, very critical. Okay, so they are, as he said, hugely important in terms of how it's building, shaping the society. Okay, and so I won't discuss that, but the critics of Pierre Bourdieu that are interesting, but maybe we can switch to the discussion, and how the idea here is how cultural tastes and practices are socially reflected in the UAE. How can we analyze cultural practices in the UAE regarding different types of capital? If you think about abaya and fashion, this is a new phenomenon in the UAE that you can see everywhere. You go to Dubai Mall, you can see that. Society is changing into more modernized society, and you can see abaya associated more and more to fashion. When you look in the stores as well, you see abaya are more and more sophisticated. What does that mean? Who is doing that? Culture and luxury goods, of course, it's important. Traditional and heritage shows in the UAE, how camel racing, how it changed, and the impact of that on the Emirati society. New activities such as motor vehicles in the desert. Okay, of course, Emirati population does not use camel anymore to go to the desert. They use big cars like that. Okay, so how it's socially created. Okay, from where? Of course, camels change a lot. Sport and competition and racing, and if you attend these races, you have a big prize money most of the time. If you attend these races in Abu Dhabi, it's a lot of money that you can make. Of course, there is this competition, and who is interested into that? Okay, falconry competition as well. If you own a falcon, you know, it's where did you get that, you know? Of course, sport and luxury cars apply to that. Horse ridings as well. And of course, pets in the UAE. It's very specific to the UAE culture. You have people with pets like that, like leopard. And it's very specific. How it's related to cultural capital, which is unique in the UAE. You don't find that in France or in the US. Okay? And last but not least, institutions. I'm finishing on that. Past institutions such as heritage institutions in the UAE, how they relate to different populations. Okay, who is concerned by these past institutions, such as here in Fujairah, Dubai Museum, where we expose the past, and the new institutions like the Louvre Abu Dhabi Museum. Who is going to the Louvre Abu Dhabi? That would be a good question to finish this presentation. Thank you very much.